Welcome back on board the Starship. I'm talking to Detective Constable Gary Heseltine about UFOs. Now, we were talking before the break, Gary, about this case near Concert,
Yep.
where a cylindrical object was seen. Now, do you know if there have been many other cases of that sort of shape? Because most, well, not most, but many UFO cases are of the classic flying saucer. So, I mean, this is a very unusual sort of shape.
Well, I would say not. Perhaps to the general public who are unfamiliar with the detail of the subject, then most people associate the word flying saucers to discs,
Yeah.
and that is obviously one of the main kinds of shapes involved. But historically, over the last 60 years, researchers can establish that there are basically four main types, which is the sphere, the disc, the triangular shaped object, and the cylindrical shaped object. Cylindrical objects, UFOs, are more akin to regarded as mothership kind of objects, seen very high at high altitudes, but of huge dimensions.
Like the George Adamski mothership type
Yeah,
thing,
kind
maybe.
of, kind of.
Yeah.
That kind of scenario.
All right. Now, we're going to come on to a black triangle case in the third PRUFOS case. But before that, there was a case in South Wales.
North Wales, sorry.
North Wales.
North Wales.
Near a nuclear power plant.
Yeah.
That's another recent case.
Yeah, it's recent in a sense that the officers approached me this year, so it's recent. And that's generally how it happens. Most of the accounts I get are historical, where officers are retired, they suddenly find out that there's my database, and they feel compelled to approach me with their stories.
Yeah, how they, like time can go by, and then they'll say, "Oh, well, I've got to get around to reporting that UFO case from."
Yeah, but what you've got to understand is a lot of officers who are retired. You know, whilst I'm well known within the UFO community, I'm not on the BBC every day or ITV or on Sky One. If you did have that kind of programme, a lot more people would know what you did. So literally, they might just look on a million UFO websites, never come across me. But as time's gone on, obviously I'm more well known within the field, and so they will come across my database and they'll think, well, I have a story to tell, and that's how they generally approach me.
Just before we come on to this Welsh case, I have recently added a reporting mechanism on my website, richplanet.net, where non-police officers can report their cases to me, and I'm actually working in collaboration with Birmingham UFO Group.
Dave Hodrian,
Yeah, Dave Hodrian. He's helping me, and we're going to get Dave on the show at some point to discuss,
he's
because this case has come in almost every day. And that seems to be working very well. But to get back to this Welsh case, Gary, tell us about this.
Well, funnily enough, this is the classic flying saucer case. What you have is it's 1982, it's winter time, and you have got a small village near Festiniog up in the North Wales mountains, basically. And from where this local village Bobby, and he was the only one, obviously lived in the police house with his wife, their perspective, literally from their back garden, was across a lake, and in the distance there was this nuclear power station, and which is now decommissioned. But he said on one particular night he went out.
At the time it was active.
It was active at the time, and he went out there late at night, and he saw what he described, and his wife saw it as well, a classic flying saucer shape, but huge dimensions, that was there, I think, to the right of the power station, and they watched it for many minutes, and then suddenly, gone in the blink of an eye. Now, this is typical of the kind of case that gets reported to me. Now, why would he, all these years later, we're talking 1982, so 28 years later, why is he suddenly contacting me now? And he said it's just because I found that you've got a database. I never had the facility to go to anybody before, and I feel comfortable with telling you about what this is. But he has given me his sighting report, signed declaration, photographs, everything. So I'm happy who he is, photographs in uniform and things like that. So that's a great case.
All right, and again, power stations, power plants are often featured with in nuclear facilities as well. It seems to crop up again and again.
It does, and that's what I'm saying is that to the general public, you're not told about the best evidence of the subject, and this is one of the areas where I feel real frustration, as do many of my other researchers, because the media have such a tight clampdown on this subject, then you're not getting the best evidence presented. Now, if I was to go to court, I wouldn't go with my weakest evidence. I would get rid of the weakest evidence. And as Stanton Friedman says, if I was on about fissionable materials, I'd only go the ones that were going to work.
Yeah.
You know, and so I'd dismiss all the stuff that doesn't work. You'd go with what you've got. So in terms of police cases, you know, we're looking at the best evidence, and that's what I'm looking for.
I mean, you're talking there about your frustration at the mainstream media, and we were at the Exopolitics conference at Leeds a few months ago, and we had a little drink after the conference, and Nick Pope was there, your friend Nick Pope.
Yeah, I've met Nick many times.
And we were discussing that very point, and you sort of turned to him and said, well, you know, if I'd had a fraction of the media opportunities that you had, Mr. Pope, you know, perhaps we'd get a more balanced view on UFOs. And I think I'd then had a few too many drinks.
I think you had.
I said, Nick Pope, you have never seen a secret document in your life. And then at that point, it went quiet and we went home. Anyway, it's okay, to get back to the next PRUFOS case. Black Triangle in 1984.
Yeah, this is again another case that's come to me this quite recently in the last few months, and this is again one of these incredible tales in UFO literature over the last 60 years. The Black Triangle, certainly from the late 70s onwards, has become more and more prominent as a UFO structure. And this case is two police officers, early hours, as often many of them are, driving along in a marked police car on a night where the stars are out and there's very little cloud, when they become aware that there is a large object blocking out the stars. Mm-hmm. And as they look, they see it's a large triangular object. Mm-hmm. Now, at the time when they first see it, it's actually over some football fields. So they actually get a perspective of its width and dimensions, and they describe it as being bigger than 2 football fields put together. Yeah. Now, this is a machine that's blanking out the stars. It's quite clearly visible to them. It's at an altitude of 50 to 100 feet, which is very, very low.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they've got these real dimensions. So if you're seeing something that close, your estimate is likely to be much more accurate, in my opinion, because they can put it in the perspective of the football fields. It's the football fields, it's above them, it's bigger than that. 2 football fields. Mm-hmm. This is, by anybody's definition, a huge triangular object that's moving in total silence. Yeah. They follow it in the police car. And at one point it goes directly over the police car. They're out of the car. They're standing up, listening to see if they can hear anything. They don't hear a thing. Yeah. And this is, again, one of those common characteristics of what I would call a genuine UFO, i.e. silence.
Silent.
Generally is one of those characteristics.
The triangular UFO, I mean, Omar Fowler has written a lot about this and researched this, because there were cases in Derby in the 1990s, in Belgium, I believe.
Yeah, that's most famous.
Also the New York cases in the early 80s, probably not long before
Hudson Valley. Yeah.
They all seem to be post-1980, don't they?
Yeah.
Cases.
Now, why that is, who knows, but but is there any doubt that these objects are being seen and reported around the world? Then I would say no. There is absolutely no doubt. People are seeing large triangular objects.
I mean, and David Caton he reported on one case on the M56.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And I put it to him, and I also put it to Omar Fowler, that it could be one of these secret flying triangle crafts that the Americans are alleged to have developed, the TR-3B being one of them.
You mean like a stealth black project?
Yes, but like one that's got a back-engineered anti-gravity system in it, which is why nuclear powered. It's alleged to be, which is why it's silent.
Well,
but I mean, they haven't even disclosed it. It's been.
I think what weakens that is that, certainly when you look at America and the Groom Lake facility, Area 51 as it's called, they literally have thousands of square miles in which they could trial these kind of stealth reverse engineered kind of objects. Why would in 1984 there be an object of those dimensions flying above an urban area? Yeah. And the reality is that that's not going to happen, because it would obviously, it's safety. if it was, if man was doing this, then you would have all the safety considerations and permissions in airspace. No, these objects are seen and operate often not on radar, which defies our radar technology, and they just can't be explained away as any kind of conventional or atmospheric answer.
All right. Now, when I first contacted you, Gary, it was a few years ago, because I was contacted by a chap called Robert Hall.
Yep, Robert.
A Geordie gentleman who insisted to me that he had seen an extraterrestrial in 1940.
Yep.
And you can watch the whole documentary from the richplanet.net website. If you click on richplanet.net TV and then click on the Gateshead Grey, you'll be able to watch the full documentary, which charts Robert Hall's story. Because when I first got involved with Robert, one of the things that Robert gave me was this article, which was written by you.
Yeah.
And I think you maybe wrote this around about 2002 or something like that.
Probably about 2004.
Was it? Is it right? Okay. Because Robert actually took you around all of the streets where this egg-shaped UFO was witnessed in a back street, where he allegedly witnessed an extraterrestrial, which was then slain by his uncle
Ernie
Wren.
Yeah.
And may sound rather preposterous to if you just sort of tell this story in the pub, but you researched this quite extensively, and then I kind of took it on after you'd finished researching it, and my quest was to try and find one of the other witnesses, which Robert claims to be, and I did come that close, because there is I just wanted to ask you about this, Gary. There is a lady who's still alive, who lived in the house where Robert Hall alleges that the UFO came down in the backyard. And I've traced her. Yeah. And I knocked on her door, and I've knocked on her door several times, and she started getting annoyed at me knocking on her door. So I wrote her a letter, and I couldn't help feel that she was being evasive and that she knew something. Because everyone else who I've knocked on loads of doors with this case, and every person has been friendly. Oh, well, no, I haven't heard about that, or what have you.
Well, perhaps I should cut in with an interesting anecdote, which I think will tie in with what you're trying to get across there.
Yeah.
Whether this lady has seen something or not, who knows? She gave you the impression that she did know more, but she just didn't feel comfortable talking about it. Now, in my 8 years of research with police officers, I have been told on a couple of occasions, go see that guy, he's told me he's had a UFO sighting. And so I've obtained the telephone numbers, and I've rang these people. And I said, well, I've been talking to PC so-and-so and so, and he tells me that you've got a UFO sighting. I don't want to talk about it. Bang. That's very rare.
Yeah.
But I've had that a couple of times. But what that tells me is not that they didn't have a UFO sightings. It just means that for whatever reason, they're either uncomfortable to go down that avenue because it's too frightening or whatever, or they're still traumatized by it. But the clear inference is something happened, but I just don't want to talk about it. And maybe this lady is the same.
Yeah, because I actually heard from another lady who lived next door to her, who was evacuated at that time during the war, so she didn't witness anything. She was talking to this lady in the street, her friend, and she brought it up. She said, oh, has that guy contacted you yet? The guy who's researching the UFO case, he's making a documentary. And she wouldn't even talk to that friend about it. So this is someone she's known all her life, and she blanked her own friend. I did trace the name of the guy who Robert Hall was with on that day, but unfortunately he's no longer with us. And this lady may well be one of the girls who Robert Hall claims were trying to run away and were cutting their hands on the barbed wire fence as they were trying to get away from this craft.
What you've got to put in perspective, the first time Robert contacted me, he told me this tale, and for the first hour I thought this guy's as mad as a hatter, I'll be honest. But the more I fired questions back at him, the more he came back with what I thought was a lot of detail. Streets, place names and things like that, and he began to get me curious, to the point where I felt like he was telling free recall, and I'm an advanced interviewer, and so I'm pretty good at judging whether somebody's telling me the truth or not. And it sounded factual, so that's what led me to go up to Newcastle to meet him and take me around these places. And on the face of it, it's the truly incredible tale, but at the heart of it, I do think something happened. And the curious anecdote to all of this is that he himself told me that he'd been on the Alan Robson show in Newcastle,
Yeah.
local radio presenter, TV presenter, and they'd done a programme probably 7 or 8 years ago, and some people had actually rang in on that night and said, yeah, we remember it being in the papers,
Yeah.
which is what which is what Robert Hall has always said, it was in the papers.
Yes.
Now, we have yet to find that,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, the Alan Robson show was not recorded,
Yeah.
and nor were the list of callers that came in, which is a real frustration. But in a way, that's an anecdote that corroborates that something about this case was in the papers in the 1940s.
Yes. Yes. All right. Well, let's come on to UFO disclosure, Gary, because it's creeping up in the media, isn't it, now and again, especially with that press conference the other week with Robert Hastings. You mentioned it earlier.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
Charles Holt.
27th of September at the
Yeah.
Washington Press Club.
You know, and the subject seems to be being treated a little bit more seriously in our mainstream media. You don't think so?
I would argue that nothing is changing.
Right.
In the media, for the simple reason why I do that is that on the day that was released, there was on the Sun website they did a bigger picture on a feature on it, like a page feature, but actually in the newspaper. Now, if you're not computer literate, you're not on the internet, you will read the newspaper or
Yeah.
the TV, and in the Sun newspaper edition, there was I think a 4-line little caption
Right.
in the middle of a page on something like page 22.
Yeah.
So to my mind, there was a big distinction between what was going out online
Yeah. Yeah.
and what was in the mainstream media, and I found that fascinating. I personally think that the media have got a terrible clampdown on the subject, and it's worked for 60 years, and we will find it extremely hard to break that down. But undoubtedly, we're getting closer and one of there's a few ways that I think the disclosure dam will break, as it were. In Washington in May, I heard a lecture by A.J. Javad, the Brazilian researcher, and he has been working with the Brazilian government.
Yes.
Not the other way around. The Brazilian government approached civilian UFO researchers, he and others, and said, look, we want to start disclosing our stuff, but this is our good stuff. And they were getting admirals, colonels, generals, brigadier generals to go on the record and produce and release reports that they'd studied over many years that concluded that UFOs were of an extraterrestrial origin. So a complete different attitude to the way it's portrayed in the media in England, and we've always taken America's lead. And in America and Britain are the most secretive governments about UFOs.
Yes.
And this is quite disturbing, because you are led to believe one thing in the way that the media presents the subject, but if you went to Brazil, the government are actively releasing their top documentation that to any other court of law in the land would say this is top testimony, 2-year report about sightings in the Amazon, conclusion extraterrestrial.
Yeah.
But you're not getting told about this,
No.
and I find that worrying.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, like we looked at the BBC article there that they have on their website.
It's a total exaggeration of the details,
Yeah.
the facts.
Yeah, it's appalling. The BBC's that article was appalling, I have to say. Now there's a new documentary out called The Day Before Disclosure. Tell us about that, Gary.
Yeah, when I was in Washington in May, there was a couple of camera teams there. There is another one coming out as well about disclosure. I think, I'm not sure the title on that, but this one is by a Norwegian film director called Tej Tofnens. And basically he got a lot of the top researchers from around the world and got them to give their opinion on disclosure and how do you think it will break and things like that. And it has just been released, literally this month. You can go straight to the Day Before Disclosure official website.
It's free to watch online, The Day Before Disclosure.
It's a brilliantly put together documentary.
And you're in it?
Yeah, I'm in part 2. It's in 3 parts. Part 1, part 2, part 3. It's free. Watch it. It's a very well put together. And if you didn't have a clue about the reality or the main subject of UFOs, I would urge anybody to watch that. And you will, if you have an open mind at the end of that documentary, you will feel as if you are not being told quite the truth.
All right then, Gary. Well, thanks very much indeed for coming in. And if there are any police officers out there who
Yeah,
have had
absolutely.
sightings,
Every time I go on the television, I ask for any serving retired officer to come and go. All you got to do is put my name, put UFOs and police, and it will bring you up to my website.
Right.
And from there, it's got all my contact details.
right? So do they actually fill it in via a form, or
No,
do
no,
they
no.
telephone you?
There's my telephone number. There's my address there.
And
Email address. They can, you know.
and it's
they
in
can-
total confidence.
Total confidence. Yeah. If they want anonymity, fine. As long as I check them out, fine.
Okay. All right then, Gary. Well, thanks very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you for
Been
asking
a pleasure
me.
talking to you again.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure for you, Richard.
Okay. We'll get you beamed back down to planet Earth.
Thank you. I'm getting a bit giddy.
It just remains for me to say, keep your eyes on the skies, keep your feet on the ground, and tell all your friends about this show.